Channel 2 News.
The Pentagon says it was a military command and control center.
This was a legitimate military target, and it was struck as it was planned and as it was targeted.
The Iraqis insist it was a civilian shelter.
I don't know why do they hit children
But what if it was both? When the lines between civilian and military targets are blurred during war, we'll examine that painful dilemma tonight.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington with the latest on the Gulf War, Ted Koppel.
Today, as the Gulf War entered its second month, what has seemed all too often a remote and bloodless battle took on a ghastly human face. There is no reason to doubt the word of U.S. military commanders who insist that what was bombed in Baghdad today was an Iraqi command and control center. But the evidence is also overwhelming that hundreds of men, women, and children had taken shelter in that building, and most of them were killed. Sometimes in wars, civilians are targeted intentionally. The Germans did that during the Second World War when they aimed their V-1 and V-2 rockets at London, and then when the Luftwaffe bombed Coventry. And by grim coincidence, it was on this day, 46 years ago, that more than 35,000 Germans died as the result of Allied bombing raids against Dresden. But in this war, the United States and its coalition partners insist that they are doing everything humanly possible to avoid civilian casualties. What still remains unanswered, however, is what will happen if Saddam Hussein deliberately insulates his remaining strategic targets by placing them in the midst of civilian centers, or by sheltering civilians at military targets, as may have been the case today. We begin with this report from Nightline correspondent Jeff Greenfield.
From a military point of view, nothing went wrong. The target was struck as designated.
4 weeks after the Gulf War began, the United States came face to face with the real face of war. Not the images of pinpoint hits on buildings and bridges, not the high-tech wonders of weapons that blow up only buildings, but the deaths of hundreds of civilians in the capital of the adversary. They died in a building bombed by American planes, a building described by Allied forces as a clear-cut military target, claimed by Baghdad as a civilian bomb shelter.
A lot of children, many women.
It was the kind of horror that sent Allied spokesmen into a day-long effort to explain what had happened and to put responsibility for the dead and injured squarely back on Saddam Hussein. This morning, at the military briefing in Riyadh.
In fact, it was a command and control bunker. I can't explain if there were civilians in there, why they were in there.
U.S. military officials here in Riyadh fended off inquiries all day long until the regular briefing. On camera and off, they took a hard line. They had radio transmissions and photos, they said, showing that the Baghdad bunker was a legitimate military target.
At the White House, where the normal rules were suspended to permit on-camera coverage of Press Secretary Marlin Fitzwater.
That Saddam Hussein does not share our value in the sanctity of life. Indeed, he time and again has shown a willingness to sacrifice civilian lives and property that further his war aims.
One idea that was considered was the release of the satellite information upon which the decision to bomb that facility was made. However, the CIA, as it has in the past, vetoed that idea.
In a speech by Defense Secretary Richard Cheney.
There is in Iraq a city called spelled U-R. It's a city of significant archaeological interest. Satellite imagery obtained just this morning indicates that there are now 2 MiG-21s, combat aircraft of the Iraqi Air Force, parked right next to the pyramid.
At a Pentagon briefing this afternoon.
The fact that it has a camouflage roof, the fact that it has a security fence around it with barbed wire.
Everything that we're seeing relative to this facility is coming out of a controlled press in Baghdad.
So the game of damage control became one of expressing the right tone over the deaths of civilians while suggesting that Saddam Hussein had no grounds to complain because of his own Scud attacks against civilians, suggesting maybe even that he had put Iraqis in danger by situating them at a military facility.
In Great Britain today, news of the bombing spurred criticism among some opposition Labourites.
Is it not clear there is a growing revulsion, not only among the Arab nations, but throughout the world at what is happening in Iraq?
In Jordan, which tonight declared 3 days of mourning for the dead, the bombing intensified feelings already present.
After following this war for 4 weeks in their own newspapers, a lot of people believe the U.S. is not only hitting civilians, but is deliberately hitting civilians. Few people, in any case, believe that the carnage in this war only started today.
In Moscow, a group of Communist Party leaders within the Soviet military bitterly denounced U.S. policy in the Gulf, claiming its real purpose was to kill Iraqi civilians. And on Soviet TV, there was this skeptical assessment of what had happened.
The war is actually one-sided since Iraq is virtually defenseless against the American and Allied Air Force. There are very few untouched military targets left in Iraq, and that's why the civilian population is increasingly becoming the real victim.
At the United Nations, the Security Council voted to hold a closed-door debate to discuss the war in the Gulf. And on British TV, one military expert declared that the mingling of civilians with the military was a recurring fact of Iraqi life.
The Iraqis apparently constructed over the last 10 years a vast network of large shelters of 2 stories, one above ground, or partially above ground, and the other below ground. The idea is the portion above ground would be used as an air raid shelter either for military or civilians, and the portion underneath as a command and control center.
Back in the United States, most people we asked, not all but most, saw the deaths as an inevitable fact of warfare, and they knew who they held responsible.
Whenever you have war, there's always going to be casualties. If they're going to hide behind kids or women and children or whatever, they should suffer the consequences.
They claim that they hit the bunker for military reasons, but it's very questionable.
Well, anytime you have a war situation as it is right now, unfortunately, civilian casualty is going to happen.
Ironically, it was a general who was one of the few Americans today to raise the moral issue.
The fact is that it looks like civilians were hurt here. We're going to examine our consciences very closely to determine if we can't do something in the future to preclude that. Obviously, we didn't know that the civilians were in there, or we would not have bombed the thing.
Should the United States stay its hand if Iraqi civilians are used to shield military targets? Are there some targets that are just not worth the cost of civilian lives? And will this tragedy change public opinion here, or among the Allies, or in the Third World? Tonight, there are some very hard questions to answer. Jeff Greenfield for Nightline in New York.
When we return, the dilemma of how to deal with military targets placed near civilians. We'll talk with ABC correspondent Bill Blakemore live from Baghdad. He toured the bomb shelter earlier today. And with Admiral William Crowe, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And later in our broadcast, we'll talk with Vitaly Churkin, the chief spokesman for the Soviet Foreign Ministry, about his country's diplomatic mission to Iraq.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Ford.
Know our assignment and go out and do it with some aggressiveness.
Why is it that some people constantly manage to reach heights others can only dream of? A few towns in western Pennsylvania have produced more football legends than any other place.
We play with poison.
Dan Marino.
We know at the end of this game.
Johnny Unitas. George Blanda. What is it about these towns that gives birth to such greatness? Fierce pride, tradition, an obsession with excellence, the very things that drive us at Ford. When leadership is in your blood, you push yourself to greater and greater heights. Our 1991 four-door Explorer and Escort have recorded the highest customer satisfaction ratings in our history. And starting right now, you'll be seeing more new models and exciting innovation from Ford and Lincoln Mercury than you've seen in years. America fell in love with Ford in the 80s, and we're going to be even tougher to beat in the 90s. Ford Motor Company.
This welcome back party was made possible in part by Super X.
Hurry up, Tom's coming.
Last month, Tom had an accident.
Okay, what have we got?
RX Watch.
With one call to the Super X 24-hour RX Watch computer headquarters, the doctors got a report on Tom's health conditions and prescriptions. Information that may have saved his life. Only Super X has RX Watch, and if you use it just once, it's worth it.
Diet Cola. Diet Cola.
What's it like to break the mold? the cold of Diet 7-Up. Taste the cold. Taste the cold. Feel it take you a few degrees away from the everyday. Diet 7-Up with NutraSweet. Break the ice.
With anti-American feelings on the rise in Jordan, Diane Sawyer is there to interview King Hussein and his American-born wife on Primetime, Thursday.
Joining us now live from Baghdad is ABC's Bill Blakemore, who toured that bombed air raid shelter earlier today. And here in our Washington bureau, Admiral William Crowe, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and a consultant to ABC News. Bill, are you satisfied when you went out to that shelter, which, as you've heard, the U.S. Command is describing as a command and control center, that you were able to see all parts of it?
Oh, of course not. We could only go down to the first upper level of it before the heat and the smoke stopped us. And when I asked suddenly at the end of the day to go back there again, which the official said, sure, go ahead and do it, it was still burning. They were still bringing people out, and the people bringing the bodies out of what were very clearly women and children were wearing firemen's gas masks. So it wasn't possible to get down into it yet.
But from what you have heard, and I know you've been hearing the reports back in Baghdad of what is being said here by the High Command at the Pentagon, what is your reaction to what you have heard? For example, they say camouflaged roof. You and I spoke earlier. You said you were up on the roof.
Yes, we were up on the roof. I certainly didn't notice anything like that. It seemed to be a normal gravel roof, a bit of rubble around on it, but I didn't see any camouflage on it. Maybe all I can say is I didn't see any.
What about this notion of housing civilians in what may very well have been a military target? Have you been able to talk to any Iraqi officials, and what has been their response?
We spoke with a number of Iraqi officials, and I also spoke with a number of the neighborhood officials around there, including the community leader who was appointed the head of the shelter. They all said that there was absolutely no military personnel or military activity connected with the shelter in any way. We spoke with many of the civilians who were standing around waiting for bad news from inside, and they told us, a number of them in different ways, that this is where their wives and their children went every night. We've been told that no men, except for extremely old men, were allowed in the shelter. And from everything we could gather from the people who lived in the neighborhood, since the war began, the women and children had been going there. Sometimes the women said or the men said that their wives said they were taking the children there just so they could sleep under the loud bombardment.
Admiral Crowe, a couple of years ago, when that Iranian Airbus was shot down, you personally experienced how wrong initial information can be. I remember you were briefing at the Pentagon in those days, and I'm sure in good faith were telling everyone that you thought that was a military aircraft, or at least that the aircraft was on a military mission. Is it possible that the U.S. military at this point could be so badly misinformed about that target?
In war, of course, Ted, with all the uncertainties attendant upon it, it's always possible to make a mistake. But from what I've heard today, and I followed it very closely, they certainly had considerable evidence that it was an active command and control center, and that it was active in the operations in the direction of the Iraqi war effort.
Sketch out for us, because most of us as civilians really have no real notion of what a command and control center is. What does that mean?
It normally implies offices for commanders with all the communications and staff that go with them. And I'm talking about elaborate communications, both land wires and radio, and contact with a number of units and a number of different offices where information both comes in and goes out to the active forces, field forces.
Is there any reason to believe that it would be visibly identifiable as that from the outside?
Well, they would try very hard to make it not visible or not to look like a command and control center. That's difficult with communications gear sometimes, but they would not make it obvious, no, not if they could avoid it.
So on what basis do you think U.S. intelligence would know that this was the building? I mean, I'm sure there are radio intercepts and things like that, but again, perhaps you can explain it to us a little more closely.
Well, as I understand it, and I'm not privy to all the information they have, but in the early 80s, before the war ever started, when we had a lot of human intelligence coming out of Baghdad, they converted the air raid shelter, at least it was our impression, and our information that it had been converted to a control center. Now, in this crisis, it evidently became what they call active just within the last few days, and active means that it was taking a communications role in military operations.
Bill Blakemore, I'm sure that you have raised the question with Iraqis, if not there today, then on other days, whether they would use what is essentially a civilian building for military purposes. And what do they tell you?
They tell us no, they would not.
Now, I should tell you, and this may not come as any great comfort to you, but in tomorrow morning's New York Times, they point out that one of the last major command and control centers is actually in a secret basement of the hotel in which you're staying, and indeed from which you are talking to us right now, the El Rashid.
That would surprise me a great deal. There are 35 journalists from around the world here. In fact, the Russian envoy stayed here 2 nights ago when he was here, and we would be very sensitive to that fact if it were true, because of course all of the communications equipment bringing the news that we can get out of this war is coming from here. We go down into the basement shelter constantly to find people when we have to talk about the details with putting out the news here. Sometimes people are downstairs, sometimes they're in the lobby. We have seen absolutely nothing in the grounds around this hotel, and nothing down in the shelters, which we walk through quite freely, as far as we can tell, that looks in any way military. That's all I can tell you.
Well, I should tell you also, the good news is that the Times reports that the command structure here in Washington has also ordered that the Rashid not be bombed, certainly at least for the time being. Let me raise with you, Admiral Crowe, for a moment, the question now of what would be U.S. policy, or what do you think U.S. policy would be in the event that it became clear that Saddam Hussein was deliberately either placing civilians at strategic military sites or taking strategic military targets and putting them right in the middle of a civilian center?
Obviously, it poses a very difficult dilemma, Ted. Now, we know for a fact that the main active command and control centers at the beginning of the war and in peacetime, they've been damaged, and they are moving to other places and are moving many operations and functions and facilities into civilian neighborhoods. So it's a dilemma that is upon us, and it makes our choices and some of our decisions very difficult.
Early on, before the war started, last fall in fact, when the human shields, the Americans and other nationalities, were distributed to strategic sites, President Bush, of course, made it quite clear that that would not in any way deflect him from ordering those targets hit if they had to be hit. Now, can we therefore assume that the same kind of orders would be given if Iraqi civilians were placed in those locations?
I don't know if you can assume that, but you can assume if it's a significant military target and really stands or is capable of damaging us, that yes, I think it would stay on our target list. But this question you're asking is more than a military question. It has a high political content, particularly given the vibrations that we're going to see in the Arab world and also among our coalition partners. And it will pose some very difficult political decisions.
Bill Blakemore, a last quick question to you. Are you going to be permitted to go back to that shelter again once the fire is out to examine that building?
I hope so. We're certainly asking to do that. It's just dawn here, so we don't know yet, but we're going to be asking to do that.
What kind of a night has it been as far as the air raids are concerned?
There was a little bit of bombing. The general impression from our crew here is that we slept better than usual and that the bombing wasn't as heavy last night as it has been in the previous ones.
All right. Bill Blakemore, Admiral Crowe, thank you both very much. A Soviet envoy returned to Moscow today after meeting Saddam Hussein in Baghdad, and he talked about possible peace feelers from Iraq. When we come back, we'll examine that issue with the chief spokesman for the Soviet Foreign Ministry.
Recently, DuPont announced that its energy unit would pioneer the use of new double-hulled oil tankers in order to safeguard the environment. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. DuPont, better things for better living.
Every business morning, while the rest of the world is getting up, UPS is guaranteeing overnight delivery before 10:30 to the most people, places, and businesses for up to half what other companies charge. And every business morning, more people are waking up to that fact.
Good morning.
Morning.
takes your breath away. That's the taste of real refreshment. That's the real Diet Coke. That's the taste of real refreshment. Just for the taste of Diet Coke.
There's something wacky at McDonald's.
Big Mac.
The Tiny Toon Adventures Gang.
It's Babs and Buster Bunny. And person.
Fries.
Funny.
A Diet Coke and
100 Happy Meals.
100 Happy Meals.
When's lunch?
I mean, one Happy Meal.
Now buy your kid a hamburger Happy Meal at McDonald's for just $1.99 and get a Tiny Toon flip card. Collect all 4, get all 8.
100 Happy Meals, sir.
Now what?
Better pop the trunk.
McDonald's Happy Meal, just $1.99.
It's Circuit City's Midnight Madness sale. One day only, Friday only. You're gonna save till the midnight hour with striking values. Like this 13-inch color TV, now only $139.97. And Quasar's Hi-Fi Stereo VCR with advanced features. Yours now for a low $299.97. One day only, Friday only. You're gonna save till the midnight hour at Circuit City's Midnight Madness sale.
Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art.
Aircraft carriers, amphibious assaults, naval operations vital to the Gulf War. Sam Donaldson with the man in charge of it all on Primetime Thursday.
Tomorrow we'll keep you up to date on the Gulf War.
Also a Valentine's reunion with loved ones left behind.
And on Friday, Caroline Kennedy on Good Morning America.
Joining us live now from Moscow to explain his country's mission to Iraq is Vitaly Churkin, the chief spokesman for the Soviet Foreign Ministry. Before we get to the Primakov mission, Mr. Churkin, the reaction in Moscow today within government circles about the bombing in Baghdad earlier today.
Well, the day is only starting here, Ted, but I expect there is going to be considerable uneasiness in the press and in the population about what has happened there. There has been a lot of criticism voiced of our government's position in this crisis in support of the Allied effort. So I would expect that it would increase the pressure on the government to do something in order to see the hostilities stopped in the Persian Gulf.
Is there any uneasiness within the government now about the position that it has taken in association with the Allies?
No, we remain to be committed to the UN Security Council resolutions, but there is a concern that there is a certain threat of the things in the Persian Gulf going beyond the framework of the UN Security Council resolutions.
Yevgeny Primakov returned to Moscow yesterday, your time. I gather he has already met with President Gorbachev. Is there any reason to believe that Saddam Hussein has softened his position on withdrawing from Kuwait?
Mr. Primakov seems to be very, very cautiously optimistic about the prospect, optimistic enough to suggest that it might be worthwhile to receive Tariq Aziz here in Moscow. As you know, he is going to come here on Sunday and talk to Gorbachev and Besmertnych on Monday.
When you say optimistic about the possibility that the Iraqis might withdraw unconditionally from Kuwait?
Optimistic, very cautiously, I say, about a possibility of some movement on the part of the Iraqis, and hopefully, I would like to emphasize, a change in their very rigid position, which would make it possible to implement the UN Security Council resolutions.
That change of the rigid position, as you know, the UN Security Council takes, or the resolutions collectively take a rather tough position themselves, in that they require a complete and unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait and the restoration of Kuwait's legitimate government. What is it, from what you are able to tell us, that Mr. Primakov brings back that causes him to believe that the Iraqis may be changing their position on those 2 points?
Well, I cannot describe in detail what Mr. Primakov talked to Saddam Hussein about in Baghdad, but first, we were talking only about the implementation of the UN Security Council resolutions, and second, as you know, in diplomacy, there are some things which come in addition to the words which are being said. So I guess there was something which Mr. Primakov observed in Baghdad, and a factor was also the willingness of the Iraqis to dispatch Tariq Aziz to Moscow that made him very, very cautiously optimistic that there was some kind of a promise of the Iraqis changing their position.
There is only so much, of course, that the Soviet Union can do with regard to carrying these negotiations forward. At which point would the United States have to become involved?
Well, the sooner the better, and we, of course, are going to keep the United States informed of the process of our talks with the Iraqis, but it's important to elicit some kind of positive movement on their part, first of all. But we are certainly not against the United States involvement in the negotiating process if there is a chance of success, and when the United States deems it necessary to join the process.
What can you share with us, Mr. Churkin, about Mr. Primakov's impressions of the atmospherics in Baghdad these days? And I'm talking also about the mental attitude of Saddam Hussein.
Nothing.
Because?
We are still in the process of talking with the Iraqis, and Commissioner Primakov has not authorized me to make any statements.
He didn't come back with any impressions that, that he's willing to share with the rest of the world at this point, then?
That is my impression, yes.
If you were a betting man, and I don't know whether you are or not, you think we are any closer to peace tonight than we were before Mr. Primakov went to Baghdad?
I'm not a betting man, but we're in a slightly better position diplomatically, I think, because there is an indication of the possibility of resumption of dialogue, and our channels of communication with the Iraqis are open, and we are hopeful for the next round of talks with the Tariq Aziz, though again there is not much solid ground for hope.
Mr. Churkin, I thank you very much. I know it's early in the morning in Moscow. Good of you to join us.
Thank you.
I'll be back in a moment.
Fact. Right now, your Ford dealer can offer you dealer incentives and option packages that can save you thousands. Fact. Savings on the best-built, best-selling American cars and trucks. Call it leadership. Call it winning. Call it anything you want. The simple fact is, Ford is #1. Get all the facts and all the savings during Leadership Month at your Ford dealer now.
Did you know if you're not using the AT&T network, your company waits over 40% longer for long-distance calls to connect?
I'm gonna wait till the midnight hour when there's no one else around. I'm gonna wait till the midnight hour.
Without AT&T, in 1 year you may end up paying people thousands of dollars to wait.
I'm gonna wait till the
Faster connections, another AT&T advantage.
I go to Lens Crafters because with my job, glasses in an hour are not just a convenience, they're a must.
Lens Crafters puts the whole lab right in the store to custom craft your top quality glasses in about an hour. Call Lens Crafters at 1-800-522-LENS.
You're going to be knocked over by Tartar Control Aquafresh. It reduces ugly tartar and more. It helps remove plaque and fights cavities with fluoride, with taste that knocks over the leading brand. For a great deal more, get Tartar Control Aquafresh.
An FBI trainee. A brilliant psychotic.
I'm here to learn from you.
Mind against mind.
What does he do, this man you see?
Clue for clue.
I'll help you catch him, Clary. You know who he is, don't you?
She's playing a game she can't lose.
Tell me his name, Doctor.
To find a killer, she must stop. The Silence of the Lambs, rated R. Starts Thursday, February 14th at theaters everywhere.
Tomorrow on Primetime Live, Diane Sawyer talks with King Hussein of Jordan and with his wife, Queen Noor, amidst a rising tide of anti-American sentiment in Jordan. And Sam Donaldson reports from the Gulf on preparations for an amphibious assault. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been ABC News Nightline. If you wish a video cassette version of Nightline, the cost is $14.98. plus $3.95 shipping and handling.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
America's watching ABC.
Nashville has a great new morning show on 103 KDF, but we're thinking about changing the name.
Mutants, mutants, mutants.
Why don't you call it the Little Man Show?
We were just joking about calling the show Ian and the Morning Boners,
But the name just kind of stuck. Ian and the retentive, scatological, demented mutants.
you can just stand there. But if you can come up with a better name for Nashville's new #1 morning show, we'll pay you $5,000. Listen to KDF tomorrow at 7:10 for details on winning $5,000.
Touchstone Pictures presents Bette Midler and Woody Allen.
Well, look at you.
Together at last, proving there's room in a marriage for many wonderful and intimate things.
I love you.
But the truth
I had an affair.
is not one of them.
Wow! You are the most callous, selfish, short-sighted...
You sure?
I hope you